Kemba looking like Kemba again, dropping 34. Stephen A., how are you feeling about Boston now?
You know what? I'm feeling a hell of a lot better. They've beaten Indiana, Washington, and the Clippers.
You are.
So I'm feeling a lot better about them. They needed to step up, and that's exactly what they're doing. Remember, we never lamented them from a talent perspective. We know that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are studs. And we know that even though Paul George had a big game, he didn't have a big game in the fourth quarter, A. And B, more importantly, it was primarily because of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and the way they defended against him, because he shot like 1 for 11 against them and was lights out against everybody else. So those brothers deserve a lot of credit. But Kemba Walker's got to get most of the credit. He hit 25, and what Max and I both lamented last week was the fact that he clearly was not healthy. His knee has been bothering him. We know what Kemba Walker can do when he's healthy. Here's the thing. We pointed the finger at Brad Stevens, or at least I did, and you're damn right, I ain't apologizing for it, because at the time, he deserved it. You got to find the pulse of the team and peel out whatever's necessary. Now, whatever has happened since he's been on the hot seat, it ain't just the players that has responded. It's Brad Stevens who has responded. Never question his basketball acumen, never question his know-how, never question the fact that he had a winning record. Remember, they went to the playoffs the last 4 years, and 3 of the last 4 years they were in the conference finals. We can't sneeze at the job that Brad Stevens has done. The problem is what he was doing up until a week ago was very unimpressive, and it looked like the team was going in the wrong direction. And if you're going to point the finger at anybody else, why the hell should he get let off the hook? But ever since that noise was percolating, particularly after they lost to Atlanta, and Gallinari gave them 38 for crying out loud, we saw Brad Stevens be more demonstrative in his post-game interview than ever before, and ever since then, they win in basketball games. So major props to him, because whatever modifications that needed to be made, clearly he has made them as a coach as well. Whatever conversations he may have had, whatever motivational tactics he may have employed, whatever you want to point to, Brad Stevens has stepped up. But damn it, he needed to step up based on the way they were looking, and props to him for doing so thus far.
No, I totally disagree. And this just goes back to, like, here's some new evidence, and you and I are exactly on the opposite side of it still. I don't think it's about Brad Stevens, Stephen A. We both knew last week that this season Kemba hadn't been Kemba. That's the bottom line. And Danny Ainge put a roster together heavily reliant on Kemba being that playmaker in the backcourt in order to make it a real big three on offense. Now, you can talk about defensive effort, and I can point to the fact that it's still going to get better when Marcus Smart gets back, and he hasn't been there. But that also affected the offense, because even if he's not a dynamic offensive player, he can play in the backcourt. He can play your point. So no Marcus Smart and no real Kemba Walker. And Kemba is too much of a leader to make excuses. Even ask him now, hey, are you feeling better? He won't even tell you, yeah, that's the reason. No, he says he's playing better. He's not going to give you excuses. It's one of the things that makes him a real leader and a guy that they wanted in that locker room. But he wasn't Kemba Walker. And how does that affect the defense? Stephen A., we don't have to like it, but we know it's reality. And in fact, I'm sure you have mentioned this on the air in the past, because everyone knows it in basketball. If you want a big man to play defense, what do you have to do if he runs the floor? You got to feed him. You got to feed him to get him to go on the other end, right? Like, people understand this. And that goes really for teams in a lot of respects. It shouldn't be this way. You should find the resolve to play defense even when the offense isn't working, and good defense can lead to better offense. But the reality is, when the offense is flat and things aren't going your way, it can take the energy out on the other end. Kemba Walker looks like Kemba Walker again. So now the offense is clicking again. And so now the defense is being played with more intensity. This was always, in my estimation, a Kemba Walker not being Kemba Walker issue, and secondarily, not having Marcus Smart. Oh, and by the way, I'll say it again as I said it last week. Time Lord needs more minutes. Look what happens when this dude is on the floor. He can really play. My feeling about the Celtics is exactly as it was. They need a healthy Kemba Walker, period. They got him now, it looks like.
Well, first of all, let me say this. Kemba Walker all of a sudden didn't get healthy the last 3 games. He's got 32, 21, and 25 points over the last 3 games. He didn't all of a sudden get healthy. The reality of the situation is that you had to figure out a way, whether it was to motivate him, get him to motivate other people. Whatever needed to be done was done. thus far anyway. And that's why I say I'm still not backing off of what I had to say about Brad Stevens. Nobody said he couldn't coach. Nobody said he didn't have a resume. Nobody said that he deserved to be fired or anything like that. What we said was, excuse me, Brad Stevens, this is what the expectation is for a team with this level of talent. And I don't give a damn Kemba Walker or no Kemba Walker. With Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, you have no business being a below 500 team in the National Basketball Association with those two studs on the court for you. You just don't. And so as a result, even though Kemba Walker has stepped up and he's playing better, and we appreciate that, the reality of the situation is it doesn't change what we saw. It doesn't change what our demands are of Brad Stevens being in Boston. There are expectations that come along with being with this team. You could lose in the playoffs, but you got to be formidable and you got to be a threat. You can't be a below 500 team, which at the time was a worse team than the New York Knicks. There's no excuse for that. And so even though Kemba Walker getting 32, 21, and 25 over the last 3 games is sort of resurrecting himself, even though he's still fighting those knee injuries, and we understand it because we know what he can do when he's healthy, the bottom line is that still doesn't absolve Brad Stevens from what he has to do. If you go to any coach, any quality coach in the NBA, and you say, here's Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, nobody wants to hear an excuse as to why you're below 500. That's why we were having the discussion about Brad Stevens. It wasn't some long-term thing or anything like that. We were looking at the Celtics and we were like, yo, they're below 500. No excuse for that.
Well, look, put it this way. You could always say, like, is Brad Stevens a perfect coach? No. Is it legitimate to say, hey, you still got enough to be more competitive than, right, no one's perfect, but to be more competitive than you are? Yes, that is a legitimate point to make. My point is, what is the top point? Like, what's the reason if you have to pinpoint one? Is it Brad Stevens? No, it's Kemba Walker's health. And Stephen A., you said, I mean, like, just look what happened. You can watch him move. He's obviously moving better than he was. He's obviously more healthy than he was. And lo and behold, as you mentioned, 32, 25, and they're starting to win. And in fact, when you say, did he suddenly get healthy? No, he gradually got healthy. He had the procedure right in the offseason, and at first it was no good, and little by little he's regained his health. And in fact, what I think we're seeing, knock wood, is that over the last week or so, he's feeling much closer, if not back to his normal self. And here we go. So could Stevens do a better? Everyone could do a better job when you're losing. But if you want to say what's the reason they're losing, they didn't have Kemba. They got him now, and they're winning.
Yeah. Well, he didn't play against Atlanta either when they got shellacked, and that was really the final straw where everybody was concerned. So I get your point there.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll leave it there. Right now they're 4th in the East, as you guys just saw. When we come back, we have some